In this year of 20 and its friend 23, it's easy to be cynical. Glass half empty. I hate this world and I want it to die. Whoa, Nelly, take a step back. But seriously, why would any self-respecting gamer have an interest in a Disney card game? Yes, there's a risk in opening your cold black heart to any improbable outcome, but why not join me in finding out if the soon-to-be released Disney LORCANA might actually have some steep strategic gameplay to chew on, and enough about it to stand tall alongside the hype that surrounds it. So what is this cutesy behemoth? Well, it's a dueling card game a la Magic the Gathering and Pokemon. But much like those two particular games that share some commonalities, there's also a lot mechanically that separates them, and that's no different with LORCANA. So let's start with its card types. All pretty commonplace, characters live on the board and do their thing, albeit they do get summoning sickness so can't ordinarily be used until your next turn. Items do the same but don't have the ability to challenge, which we'll talk more on later, and they stand alone, not attached to characters. And then finally you've got actions that have one-time effects. These also have a subtype, songs, that can be cast for free if you exert, aka tap, a red character with a designated minimum cost. Speaking of cost, as you'd expect, every card has one, here called ink. And each character card had its own power and toughness, named strength and willpower, and its lore value for questing, which again we'll touch on in a mo. The rest of the card then is its keywords that can be used to synergise with other cards, and its body text that details any remaining shenanigans it can get up to. Turn structure is again mostly what you'd expect. Players alternate taking turns, which are broken down into two phases. The beginning phase, which contains the untap, upkeep, draw steps, but with the nomenclature ready, set, draw. Then the main phase is where you carry out actions, one at a time in any order and as many times as you've got the means to. And I want to digress quickly now to talk about the aforementioned ink. Each of the 6 colours of cards represent one colour of ink, and this is relevant when discussing deck building. It's a 60 card minimum game and you can only bring a maximum of 2 ink colours in your deck. It's not abundantly clear why this design principle is in place, but it certainly does no harm in making the game more accessible. And the fact that several key characters, including your Big Mickey, are found in multiple colours, meaning that you're not necessarily shoehorned into a particular colour combo just to play your favourite characters. Back to the gameplay then, and there's the obligatory player resource card once per turn, so you can do more good stuff as the game progresses. The cool thing about LORCANA is that you can use the bulk of your cards in your deck though as face down resources. And I say bulk because the card you reveal and place face down has to have an inkwell border around its cost. Never fear though, because a good 80% or more of your deck, if you're doing it right, will have them. The cards that don't have inkwells then are often but not always your build around cards, giving you the all important incentive to bring them. The best part about resources as well is that they're universal and so can pay for any card, regardless of the ink colour. Now, this isn't the first card game to introduce this type of resource mechanic, but it is rare, and I personally think this is the best way to merge deck building with resource generation, pure and simple. Resources in this type of game are by no means free. You have to still decide which card you want to sacrifice for its face up side. And the fact that that's not always an obvious decision based on an evolving game state, well then, hey presto, you've got a delicious layer of strategy to add to your decision making. So all of this overview of the game has gone by and we haven't even mentioned how you win. Well, the main way is not actually to beat 10 bells out of your opponent and their characters, yes this is Disney, but to obtain 20 lore. You do this by turning your character cards sideways and questing with them. Each have a lore value, and that, quelle surprise, is how much lore you get in return. You can also lose the game if you go to draw a card and your deck is empty, but this at least initially seems to be more of a way to mitigate game length than to open up another strategy to win, as there aren't any obvious mill strategies available in the current card pool. So, okay, you win effectively by doing your own thing and not interacting with your opponent other than to chat about the weather. That sounds fun. But wait, Of course there's fisticuffs and handbags in Lorcana. You see, when you exert one of your characters for whatever reason, whether it's to quest, use an ability, or sing a song, you're exposing that character to being challenged themselves, which itself is an action that requires you to exert your character, and then you watch both characters do damage equal to their strength to each other. If one then takes damage equal to or greater than their character's willpower, it's off to the discard pile you go. And that's how Disney's Lorcana plays in a nutshell. On paper it is pretty tidy, more than enough to be bringing the intrigue, but is it enough to stand out? So the main thing I would say that I'm least enthused about is the lack of interaction on an opponent's turn. There are triggered effects that can take place when it's not your go, but they are distinctly few and far between. You more or less do your own thing on your own turn and that's that. And this is actually a fairly common practice in dueling card games, so in that context it shouldn't necessarily be used as a bat to hit it with. But if reactive interaction is why you play games, then Lorcana is not going to tick that box. The next critique is actually a mixed bag rather than a negative. You see, on the one hand, exposing a character to challenges only once it's been exerted is ingenious. Stick your head above the parapet and it might get chopped off. Who doesn't like risk reward? But what if this mechanics promotes jockeying for position over being proactive and strategic with your decision making? Moving to full positive, I've already extolled the virtues of the particular resource mechanism employed here, and I can think of very little in the way of downsides to it. You can cram your deck full of good stuff, but there's some nuance to it, with not every card being available as a resource. Furthermore, the inclusion of differing colours on cards that lean towards a particular playstyle are not then further hindered by the need to have a particular type of resource to play them. Honestly, this particular element of the game I really do feel they've got spot on, and I'll hold fire in criticising the deck building limitations of a maximum of 2 colours in the deck because I don't see this being a particular drawback, especially with the way they seem to be filling out a set's card pool. The artwork and appeal factor is definitely in the plus column. There's an unavoidable contrast in the artwork source material as Disney has transitioned from an analogue hand-drawn approach to computer-generated graphics over the course of its history. As a whole, the cards you have access to, especially if you're a Disney fan, is going to bring you all sorts of giggity joy. But where does all this leave my opinion of Lorcana, and who is it for? Well, for me the game is going to live or die, at least for experienced card gamers, by how well the cross purposes of questing and challenging work. The shell of the game has everything you would want from a dueling card game, but the limited interaction will need to be compensated by how rewarding those two mechanics feel and juxtapose with each other. Ultimately, this first chapter, as they're calling the core set, will provide a really good introduction to the game, and only time will tell if Ravensburger have any bold plans to really put their all into supporting organised play. In so doing, giving the game an opportunity to foster a strong fan base that will sing its virtues and depth to anyone that will listen. In terms of who the game is for though, my sense is that no, this isn't meant to in any way, shape or form compete with the likes of Magic the Gathering. Where it can be, it is clearly and intentionally accessible in order to appeal to a younger audience. That being said, Pokemon has a similar thematic demographic appeal, and yet the game has a strong adult following, so the two do not have to be mutually exclusive. Will I be playing this though? Well, that's an interesting question I'm happy to stay on the fence with. I'll definitely be giving it a go and picking up some starter products, but will the game have any lasting appeal outside of casual games? I would say I'm 50-50 at the moment, but that's in part because I'm more on the veteran end of the card gamer spectrum. My objective opinion is that this has potential to hit more than it misses, and so if nothing I've pontificated about for the last few minutes has upset you, what have you got to lose? No matter how cynical your disposition might be, give it a go. Alas, I've been the voice of Benji, and this video has ended.